Victoria Sterling adjusted the easel in her converted warehouse studio, stepping back to admire the campaign mock-up for her newest client. The afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes that danced around. Canvases and design boards scattered throughout the space. At 32, she had built something entirely her own, Sterling Creative Agencia, boutique firm that specialized in authentic brand storytelling for small businesses and nonprofits. It was a far cry from the corporate towers where she'd once climbed ladders in designer heels, crafting campaigns for tech giants and pharmaceutical companies. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now, someone more naive, more willing to believe in fairy tale endings with powerful men who made promises they couldn't keep. Her assistant, Jamie, poked their head through the frosted glass door. Victoria, the coffee shop client, loved the rebrand concepts. They want to move forward with the vintage modern approach. Excellent. Victoria smiled genuinely, the kind of satisfaction that came from work that mattered. Schedule a meeting for next week to discuss implementation. As Jamie retreated, Victoria's gaze drifted to the rain beginning to streak the windows. Seattle's perpetual drizzle had become oddly comforting over the years, predictable in its unpredictability. Unlike the sun-soaked California days she'd left behind along with everything else, she rarely allowed herself to think about Marcus Reed anymore. The charismatic CEO who had swept her into a whirlwind romance that burned bright and ended in ashes, 5 years had dulled the sharp edges of that pain, though sometimes, in quiet moments like these, she could still feel the phantom ache of trust betrayed. Their relationship had been intense from the start, stolen. Dinners between his board meetings, weekend escapes to his Malibu house. Late nights in his penthouse office where they'd plan campaigns for his revolutionary biotech firm while sharing takeout and dreams. He'd made her feel like she could conquer the world, like together they were unstoppable. Until the morning she woke up to find him gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just a cold text message saying he needed space and couldn't contact her anymore. 3 years of love reduced to corporate speak about needing to focus on business priorities. The buzzer from downstairs jolted Victoria. From her memories, she frowned, checking her phone. No appointment scheduled, and Jamie had already left for the day. The building's other Tenetsa pottery studio and a vintage bookshop typically didn't have visitors this late. Probably a delivery, she murmured, pressing the intercom button. Sterling Creative. Victoria, it's Diana Cross. I know this is unexpected, but I need to speak with you urgently. It's about Marcus. Victoria's blood ran cold. Diana Cross, Marcus's ex-wife, the sophisticated socialite whose divorce from him had been finalized just months before Victoria and Marcus had begun dating. She'd seen her picture in business magazines, all platinum blonde elegance and calculated smiles. I don't know what you want, but please. Diana's voice cracked slightly, revealing something raw beneath her polished exterior. I know you have every reason to hate both of us, but Marcus is in danger, and you might be the only person who can help him. Victoria stared at the intercom, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to protect the careful life she'd rebuilt from the wreckage Marcus had left behind. But something in Diana's tone, desperate, frightened, made her hesitate, against her better judgment. She pressed the buzzer to unlock the building's front door. Minutes later, Diana Cross stood in her studio doorway, and Victoria was struck by how different she looked from the magazine photos. Still beautiful, still impeccably dressed in a tailored coat and leather boots. But there were shadows under her eyes and tension in her shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights and genuine fear. Thank you, Diana said simply, stepping inside. I wasn't sure you'd see me. I'm not sure I should be, Victoria replied, crossing her arms defensively. You have 5 minutes to explain why Marcus's ex-wife is standing in my studio talking about danger. Diana reached into her designer handbag and withdrew a worn leather journal, its edges softened with age and use. Because everything you think you know about why he left you is a lie. Asterisk. Diana Cross had never imagined she would find herself in a converted warehouse in Seattle, facing the woman her ex-husband had truly loved. She studied Victoria Sterling's face, still beautiful, but harder now, with walls built high from years of protecting herself from pain Diana herself had helped create. "You look good," Diana said softly, then immediately regretted the personal observation. This wasn't a social call. Victoria's green eyes flashed. "Cut the pleasantries," she said. "Marcus is in danger. Start talking." Diana set the leather journal on Victoria's work table, her manicured fingers trembling slightly. Even now, 5 years later, she could barely believe the truth she'd uncovered. "I found this 3 months ago, hidden in a safety deposit box I didn't even know existed. Marcus left it for me with instructions to find you if anything happened to him." "Happened to him?" Victoria's defensive posture softened slightly, replaced by reluctant concern. "What are you talking about?" "He's been living under an assumed identity for 2 years, Diana said, watching Victoria's face pale. "The biotech company, the penthouse, the life you knew, all fell apart 6 months after he left you. But it wasn't his choice, Victoria. He was forced out by people who threatened to destroy anyone close to him." Victoria sank into her desk chair, the weight of Diana's words settling over her like a shroud. "That's impossible. I would have heard, would you?" Diana challenged gently. "You cut all ties to that world, didn't you? Changed cities, changed careers, changed everything to get away from the pain he caused you." The accuracy of that observation hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had run completely and thoroughly, burning every bridge that might lead back to Marcus Reed and the life they'd shared. Diana opened the journal, revealing pages of Marcus's familiar handwriting. Precise, urgent. It started with the Meridian Project. "You remember that, don't you?" Victoria nodded slowly. Meridian had been Marcus's revolutionary treatment for Alzheimer's disease, the breakthrough that was supposed to change everything. She'd helped craft the marketing strategy for its eventual release. "What Marcus discovered," Diana continued, "was that Senator Robert Kane had invested heavily in competing pharmaceutical companies. Kane couldn't afford for Meridian to succeed, would have cost his backers billions in lost revenue from existing treatments." Diana flipped through pages of photocopied documents, bank records, what looked like transcripts of recorded conversations. Kane didn't just want to stop the project. He wanted to destroy Marcus completely, make sure he could never resurface in the industry. "So he left me to protect me," Victoria whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. "He left everyone," Diana said, her voice thick with emotion. "Me included, though our marriage was already over and everything but paperwork. But you, Victoria, you have to understand, he fought it for months. Look." She turned to a page filled with Marcus's handwriting. Dated just days before he disappeared from Victoria's life, they've made it clear anyone I care about becomes a target. They have photographs of Victoria leaving her apartment, detailed knowledge of her daily routines, even information about her sister in Portland. Kane's people don't make empty threats. I can't be the reason she gets hurt. I won't be. Victoria's eyes filled with tears she hadn't shed in years. Carried, the anger, the sense of abandonment, to all shifted, transforming into something else entirely. "Where is he now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Diana's expression grew grave. "That's the problem. He's been living as David Mitchell in a small town in Oregon, working as a carpenter. But 3 weeks ago, someone started asking questions. About him, the wrong kind of questions." She pulled out her phone, showing Victoria a grainy surveillance photo. This was taken outside the hardware store where he works. The man asking about David Mitchell is Thomas Brennan Kane's head of private security. Victoria's stomach dropped. "They found him. Asterisk, I think so. And Victoria, there's something else." Diana hesitated, then forged ahead. In his journal, Marcus wrote about a backup plan. Documents hidden in a place only someone who knew him intimately would think to look. He said if anything happened to him, these documents could bring Kane down, but only if the right person knew where to find them. "You think I'm that person?" No, you are." Diana leaned forward, urgency creeping into her voice. "You spent 3 years with him. You knew his habits, his hiding places, the way his mind worked. Anyone could figure out where he'd stash something that important." Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain continued to streak the glass, but she barely saw it. Her mind was spinning, processing everything Diana had revealed. grappling with the complete rewriting of her personal history. Why should I trust you? She asked finally, turning back to face Diana. You were his wife. You had everything I thought I wanted with him. Diana's laugh was bitter. I had a marriage of convenience that benefited both our careers. You had his heart. Close the journal gently. Right now, that might be the only thing that can save his life. James Morrison had always prided himself on being the ethical one. While other venture capitalists played fast and loose with regulations and investors' money, he built his reputation on transparency and integrity. Reputation had made him the perfect partner for Marcus Reed's biotech ventures until the day it nearly got them both killed. Now, sitting in a cramped diner outside Bend, Oregon, James stirred his coffee with shaking hands as he waited for the two women who held Marcus's fate in their hands. At 55, his once dark hair had gone completely gray in the 2 years since he'd entered witness protection, and the stress lines around his eyes told the story of a man who'd seen too much. Victoria Sterling slid into the booth across from him, followed by Diana Cross. James had never met either woman in person, but he'd heard enough about them from Marcus to recognize the determination in Victoria's eyes and the calculated composure Diana wore like armor. You're James Morrison, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. Officially, I'm Jim Mitchell these days. David Marcus is my nephew, according to our paperwork. James managed a weak smile. Amazing what federal marshals can accomplish when someone's willing to testify against a sitting senator. Diana leaned forward. Diana said you have information about what really happened with the Meridian project. James nodded, pulling a tablet from his worn messenger bag. I have more than information. I have proof. His fingers moved across the screen, bringing up files he'd spent 2 years compiling. But first, you need to understand how deep this goes. He turned the tablet toward them, showing a complex web of corporate connections. Senator Kane wasn't just protecting his pharmaceutical investments. He was orchestrating a systematic takeover of breakthrough medical research across the entire industry. Meridian was just the beginning. Victoria studied the diagram, her marketing background helping her decode the corporate structure. These shell companies, they're all connected to Kane's family trust. Exactly. Kane would identify promising research, then either buy out the companies quietly, or, if that failed, destroy them through regulatory challenges, patent disputes, or worse. James's voice dropped. Marcus wasn't his first target. 3 other researchers died in accidents over the past decade. Dinah's face went pale. You're talking about murder? I'm talking about a $250 billion industry where innovation threatens existing profit margins, James replied grimly. When Marcus refused to sell Meridian, Kane escalated. The threats started small regulatory inquiries, patent challenges, but Marcus was stubborn. James swiped to a new file, showing photographs and documents. Then Kane's people made it personal. Had surveillance on everyone Marcus cared about. You, Victoria. They knew your schedule, your routes to work. Even your sister's address in Portland. Diana. They had dirt on your art foundation that could have destroyed your reputation and sent you to prison for embezzlement you never committed. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. So Marcus chose to sacrifice himself instead of fighting back. Marcus chose to disappear so Kane would believe the threat was neutralized, James corrected. The plan was always to resurface once we'd gathered enough evidence to destroy Kane completely. But something went wrong. He pulled up a new document of federal witness protection file. I was supposed to testify before a grand jury 6 months ago. The night before my testimony, Kane's people found my safe house. My handler, Agent Sarah Chen, died protecting me. Diana gasped, but James continued relentlessly. They moved me. Here, to the same small town where Marcus was hiding. It wasn't coincidence. It was the only place left where we could coordinate our efforts safely. But now they found Marcus too, Victoria said. 3 weeks ago, yes. Thomas Brennan's been asking questions around town, showing Marcus's photo from the old Reed Industries days. The locals have been loyal, so far small-town people protect their own, but it's only a matter of time. James closed the tablet and looked directly at Victoria. Marcus always said you were the smartest person he knew. Said if anything happened, To him, you'd be able to find what he called the insurance policy. The documents Diana mentioned, more than documents. Marcus created a digital dead man switch fif. He doesn't check in every 72 hours. Everything gets released too. Major news outlets simultaneously. Financial records, recorded conversations, evidence of the murders Kane ordered. James leaned forward urgently. But the switch can only be reset with biometric confirmation and a specific code sequence. Victoria's mind raced.
Kind of.
Code. Something personal. Something only someone who truly knew him would understand. James's expression grew desperate. Victoria, his last check-in was 60 hours ago. We have 12 hours before the dead man's switch activates, but Kane's. People will kill him long before then if they find him. Diana pulled out her phone. Then we need to get to him now. It's not that simple, James said. Brennan has the town under surveillance. If you to show up asking for David Mitchell, you'll lead them right to him. Paused, studying Victoria's face, unless you can figure out where Marcus would have hidden the reset controls. Victoria closed her eyes, thinking back to their time together. Marcus had been methodical, sentimental in his own way. He'd kept important things in places that meant something to him personally. Not just safe, but significant. The cabin, she said suddenly, opening her eyes. He used to talk about a cabin his grandfather built near Mount Hood. He said it was the one place that felt like home. James nodded slowly. That's not in any of his official records. Kane's people wouldn't know about it. But if Marcus is in, hiding in Bend, and the cabin's near Mount Hood, Diana was already calculating distances on her phone. That's less than 3 hours' drive. In good weather, James cautioned. There's a storm system moving in tonight. Mountain roads will be treacherous. Victoria stood, decision crystallizing in her mind. Then we'd better hurry. She looked down at James. You said you have proof of Kane's crimes? Everything we need to destroy him. Good. Victoria's voice carried a steel Diana had never heard before. Because after we save Marcus, we're going to make sure Robert Kane never hurts anyone again. Asterisk, Senator. Robert Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, overlooking the Potomac, watching the lights of Washington, D.C. flicker in the darkness. At 63, he had spent 4 decades perfecting the art of power, knowing when to apply pressure, when to make deals, and when to eliminate obstacles entirely. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had aged well, despite the ruthless decisions that had built his empire. Silver hair impeccably styled, custom suit that cost more than most people made in a month.
Oh.
The bearing of someone accustomed to having his orders followed without question. Behind him, Thomas Brennan cleared his throat. Kane's head of security was built like a linebacker gone to seed, but his mind remained sharp as a blade. We have a problem, Senator. Kane didn't turn around. Define problem, Thomas. The Sterling woman and Reed's ex-wife have made contact. They're asking questions. Now Kane turned, his pale blue eyes cold as winter ice. What kind of questions? Brennan consulted his tablet. Our surveillance picked up the crosswoman visiting Sterling's studio in Seattle yesterday. Phone intercepts. Suggest they're planning to travel to Oregon to find Reed. That's our assessment. Kane moved to his desk, a massive mahogany piece that had belonged to 3 previous senators. Power had weight, and he surrounded himself with reminders of that truth. How much do they know? Unknown. But Cross had access to a safety deposit box we weren't aware of. If Reed left documentation, ... double quotes, then we clean this up. Tonight Kane's voice carried the flat certainty of a man who had ordered worse things over breakfast. What's the status on Morrison? Still in the wind since the safe house breach? If Sterling and Cross are heading to Oregon, they'll likely make contact. Kane opened his desk drawer, revealing files on Victoria Sterling that were disturbingly comprehensive. Photos of her leaving her apartment, records of her financial transactions, even medical records from her doctor visits. Information was power, and he made it his business to know everything about potential threats. Miss Sterling built quite a successful little business after fleeing California. He mused, flipping through surveillance photos. It would be tragic if something happened to it. A gas leak, perhaps. These old warehouse conversions can be so dangerous. Brennan nodded. I can have a team in Seattle within the hour. Not yet. Kane closed the file. First, we use her to find Reed. Then we eliminate all three of them together. Cleaner that way. Kane's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. It seems Ms. Sterling is more resourceful than anticipated. Our tracking devices in her vehicle have gone dark. They know we're watching them. They'll go to ground. But people in love do predictable things, Thomas. They take risks for each other that they would never take for themselves. Kane moved to a wall map, dotted with red pins each, one marking the location of a threat he'd neutralized over the years. Reed will try to protect her. That's his weakness. Brennan pulled up surveillance footage on his tablet. He lost them. After they left the diner outside Bend, but there are only so many places they can go in a storm. Kane studied the weather reports on his own screen. Mountain roads will be impassable by midnight. If they're trying to reach Reed, they'll have to shelter somewhere. He traced a finger across the digital map. Here at this cabin near Mount Hood. It's registered under the name of Reed's deceased grandfather. You want me to move the team there? I want you to move all our teams there? Kane's smile was predatory. And Thomas, make sure the disposal is thorough this time. Bodies that are never found can't testify. Brennan was already making calls as Kane returned to the window. Below, the city hummed with the machinery of government senators and staffers, lobbyists and journalists, all playing their roles in the theater of democracy. Most of them had no idea how many decisions were made in rooms like this by men willing to do what was necessary. His secure line rang. Kane, Senator, it's Deputy Director Walsh at the Bureau. The FBI official's voice was tight with stress. We have a situation. Someone's been digging into the Reed Industries investigation. Kane's jaw tightened. What kind of digging? Congressional Oversight Committee received an anonymous tip about federal witness protection breaches. They're asking questions about Agent Chen's death. Handle it. Sir, with respect, this is coming from very high up the chain. I may not be able to, Deputy Director. Kane's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. I know about your son's cocaine arrest last year, the one that mysteriously disappeared from court records. I know about your wife's insider trading through her trust fund. I know things that could end your career and put your family in prison. Silence stretched across the line before Walsh spoke again, his voice defeated. What do you need? Buy me 12 hours. After that, it won't matter. Kane ended the call and checked his watch. Nearly midnight. If his teams reached the cabin before dawn, this nightmare would finally be over. Victoria Sterling and Diana Cross would disappear into the Oregon wilderness, victims of a tragic accident during the storm. Marcus Reed would simply vanish, another missing person in a state where people went into the mountains and never came out. His phone buzzed with a message from Brennan. Teams in position. Thermal imaging shows movement inside the cabin. 3. Individuals confirmed. Kane smiled, already composing the statement his press secretary would release tomorrow. Tragic accident. Severe weather conditions. Our thoughts and prayers with the families. But as he prepared to give the final order, his secure computer chimed with an urgent alert. Someone had just accessed the Reed Industries backup servers that were supposed to have been wiped clean years ago. Kane's blood ran cold as file names scrolled across his screen. Financial records. Recorded conversations. It's evidence that could destroy not just him, but half the pharmaceutical industry. Thomas, he said into his phone, new priority. Find out who's accessing those servers and shut them down. Now. Crackled back through the speaker. Senator, we have a problem. The cabin's empty.
Ow.
They were never here. Kane's reflection stared back at him from the darkened window. And for the first time in decades, he saw something he didn't recognize in his own eyes. Fear. Asterisk. Victoria Sterling had never imagined that love could feel like coming home and going to war at the same time. As she stood in the abandoned ranger station deep in the Mount Hood wilderness, watching Marcus read her Marcus, though he looked older, weathered by years of hiding work frantically at a laptop connected to satellite equipment, her heart hammered with both joy and terror. The servers are responding, Marcus said without looking up, his familiar voice sending shivers through her despite the gravity of their situation. But Kane's people are trying to shut me out. I need the reset code now. His hands moved across the keyboard with desperate precision. Even after 5 years, Victoria could read the tension in his shoulders. The way he bit his lower lip when concentrating under pressure. Some things never changed. Even when everything else had been torn apart and rebuilt, Diana stood guard at the window. Phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with James Morrison, who was monitoring police scanners from his safe house. Keynes. Teams are searching every cabin within a 50-mile radius. We have maybe 20 minutes before they find us. Victoria moved behind Marcus, looking at the screen filled with code sequences and file directories. The dead man's switch interface was elegant in its simplicity. Single input field waiting for the combination that would either save them or doom them all. You said it was something personal, she said softly. Something only someone who truly knew you would understand. Marcus's fingers stilled on the keyboard. For the first time since she'd found him 3 hours ago, he turned to look at her directly. The years had carved lines around his dark eyes, and his once perfect hair was longer, streaked with premature silver. But when he looked at her, she saw the same man who had once promised her the world-over takeout in his penthouse office. Victoria, his voice broke slightly. I'm so sorry for everything. For letting you believe I didn't love you. We can talk about that when we're not about to die, she said, though her hand found his shoulder. Even through his worn flannel shirt, she could feel the familiar strength there. What did you use for the code? Marcus turned back to the screen. His jaw tight with concentration. Has to be something from before. Kane's people couldn't have learned from surveillance or interrogation. Victoria closed her eyes, letting her mind drift back to their time together. Late nights, stolen weekends, the private moments between a CEO and the woman who had helped him dream of changing the world. What would Marcus consider important enough to base their survival on? The night you first told me you loved me, she said suddenly. Marcus's hands froze over the keyboard. Victoria... The roof of your building. You said you'd been afraid to tell me because you'd never felt anything real before. The memory was crystalline despite the years. You said I was your midnight miracle. Diana's voice cut through. Moment. Whatever you're going to do it now. I see headlights on the access road. Marcus's fingers flew over the keyboard, entering a complex sequence. Victoria watched over his shoulder as he typed, midnight, _miracle, _0327, 19_4V, the screen. Flashed green. Files began uploading to news outlets around the world, financial records, recorded conversations, evidence of murders, documentation of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. Upload complete, Marcus breathed. It's done. Kane is finished. But their celebration was cut short by the sound of vehicles surrounding the ranger station. Floodlights blazed through the windows as armed figures took positions around the building. This is Thomas Brennan. A voice boomed through a megaphone. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands visible and no one gets hurt. Diana laughed. Bitterly. Right. Because Kane's people are known for keeping their word. Marcus stood, moving to Victoria. For a moment, the years collapsed, and they were just a man and woman who had found each other again against impossible odds. I need you to know, he said softly. Every day I stayed away from you was torture. But you were alive, and that mattered more than anything else. Victoria reached up, touching his face. I know. I understand now. How touching, Diana said, dryly. But unless we're planning to die in each other's arms, we need an exit strategy. Marcus moved to a wall panel Victoria hadn't noticed, revealing an emergency radio. James, are you monitoring this frequency? James Morrison's voice crackled through static. I'm here. David, sorry, Marcus Sue are going to want to turn. On the news. Marcus found a small battery-powered television in the ranger station's equipment closet. As it flickered to life, they saw breaking news footage. FBI agents arresting Senator Robert Kane at his Washington penthouse. Headlines scrolled across the screen. Pharmaceutical conspiracy exposed. Senator charged with murder, racketeering, biotech whistleblowers vindicated. Through the megaphone, Brennan's voice had changed tone entirely. Mr. Reed. This is Agent Jennifer Walsh, FBI, Senator Kane is in custody. You and your companions are safe to come out. Diana peered through the window. Armed figures were lowering their weapons, FBI badges visible in the floodlights. Oh, she said, that's not what I expected. Marcus pulled Victoria close, and she could feel him shaking with relief, exhaustion, and something else. It's really over. Conspiracy is over, Victoria said, leaning into his embrace. But we, ... She pulled back to look at him. We have 5 years to make up for. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, the gesture achingly familiar. I know I have no right to ask this, but Victoria, is there a chance? For us? She thought of the life she'd built in Seattle. The walls she'd constructed around her heart, the careful existence she'd crafted from the wreckage of loving him. Then she thought of the journal entries Diana had shown her, the sacrifice he'd made to keep her safe, the way he'd never stopped fighting, even when fighting meant disappearing completely. There's always been a chance, she said softly. I just needed to know the truth. Outside, FBI agents were calling for them to exit peacefully. Dawn was breaking over the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. As they prepared to step outside and face whatever came next, Marcus caught her hand. I meant what I said in that code, he told her, forever. Victoria smiled, feeling something inside her chest unfurl for the first time in 5 years. Forever, she agreed. Diana cleared her throat. If you two are finished being disgustingly romantic, I believe we have a new life to figure out. As they walked toward the door together, Victoria realized that sometimes the best endings were actually beginnings. The conspiracy was over. The truth was revealed, and the man she'd never stopped loving was finally free to love her back. Outside, the world was waiting. But for the first time in years, Victoria Sterling wasn't afraid of what it might bring.